Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doug Grant, one of the partners at Insurance Canada. It's our pleasure to be bringing you this webinar
The
today.
broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, there, a little interruption. Let me start over again. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doug Grant, one of the partners at Insurance Canada. It's our pleasure to be bringing you this webinar today, TechWatch 2018, 4 Technologies You Should Watch This Year. We do thank you for your interest and for attending. Before we begin, a few administrative details. As you are listening, should you have any questions you would like to ask to our speakers, please enter them into the questions box on the control panel. Following the presentations, our moderator will present questions you have asked to the panelists. We are also recording the webinar. We will send a note out to each of you and to those who don't actually join us today for whatever reason, giving you a link to the webinar recording so that you'll be able to see it or pass it on to others. We will end the webinar today with a short video. Now, this particular function in this webcast program is in beta mode at the moment. Those of you who are coming in by telephone won't be able to hear it, but you will be able to see it. In any case, so that you can actually hear the words that will be spoken in it a little bit later, we will include a link to the video in our post-event note that we send out to all of you. At the end of the webinar, or if you exit whenever, there is a short 2-question survey that will pop up for you. We would appreciate that you could answer it if you would. We would certainly appreciate any additional comments by email, either about the event, this particular event, or about other topics you might be interested in hearing about. On that note, let me now introduce Patrick Weiss, one of the founding partners of Insurance Canada, to introduce the content of this event and our guest speakers. Patrick, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Doug, and thank you all for joining us today. We have a fast clip for an hour and some very interesting stuff. I think you'll find to be interesting. For the last few years, we've been hearing a lot about InsurTech and its disruptive nature in the insurance ecosystem. But we're starting now to see the maturation and rationalization of InsurTech, which is driving changes in the Canadian insurance environment. Today, we're going to provide insight into 4 key technologies which are underpinning fundamental changes in insurance. Our faculty today, who will be talking to the disruption and to the opportunities there, in order of the folks that are appearing, Joseph D'Souza, who is CEO at ProNavigator. Joseph is going to be talking to artificial intelligence. Ileana Oris Valiente is Managing Director of Global Blockchain Innovation at Accenture, and not surprisingly, we'll be talking to blockchain. Clement Nunes is, and I'm sure I just got that wrong, didn't I? Cletus Nunes. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think this was somebody corrected my spelling for me. Cletus is Senior Sales Leader for Octo Telematics and is going to be talking to Auto Telematics. And last but certainly not least is Andrew Lowe, President and CEO at Kinetics Limited. And he's going to be taking on the user or customer experience. Now we're going to have a series of presentations. We will have time for Q&A after all of our experts have presented. When you do have a question coming to your mind, you can enter it into the question box, and I'll present this to the faculty. So, to continue on, we've introduced Joseph D'Souza, and Joseph, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Joseph D'Souza, founder and CEO of ProNavigator, and my focus is on how AI can drive insurance sales and productivity. And you know, back in April 2016, I remember very vividly I had a call with my insurance carrier for a quick question, and I remember being kept on hold for an hour and 35 minutes. And when the customer support agent finally came on, the answer to my question was a 2-minute conversation that could easily have been handled in another way. So after getting off the phone, I realized that, this is a huge problem, and there's got to be a better way. We're living in a world where Uber promises the car is going to arrive in 3 minutes, and it does. And so I think consumers are asking, how come I can't get that kind of predictably great experience when it comes to my insurance? And you combine that with this explosion in messaging as a communication channel. If you look at two channels, WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, there's over 60 billion messages sent every day just through these two channels. So consumers are really starting to value speed and convenience, even sometimes higher than price. And so we launched ProNavigator, which is a conversational AI platform that uses messaging and natural language processing to be able to talk to your website visitors and customers in real time, driving sales and allowing for rapid deployment and scalability. So for many of our clients, they spend so much time and effort getting people to come to their website, and often once they get there, they're left to kind of find answers on their own or fill out a form and wait to learn more. And you take that experience and you turn it into this conversational user interface where now users can ask questions, get assistance. Potential buyers want answers when it's convenient for them when they're live on your website. So I think AI is going to touch every aspect of our lives, and any company that interacts with customers, particularly where there's a high volume of possible touch points, there's an opportunity to engage. There's an opportunity where we can drive natural conversation or dialogue with that customer and also be able to do that at scale. And so when you look at the slide here, we've essentially got on the top where customers are coming in from. You can call these systems of engagement. So our current product is through messaging, where it's website, chat, Facebook Messenger, SMS, building out support for email and voice. And what we want is a layer of intelligence that can assist customers regardless of where they're coming in from, and then be able to integrate with your backend systems, whether it be your CRMs, your databases, your quoting engines. And so when you look at that layer of intelligence or that system of intelligence, there's really three pieces there. You've got a dialogue system, you've got natural language processing, which is a subset of AI, and then you need data to train these models. And what natural language understanding really does is understanding how we can capture the underlying meaning of a sentence and map that to an intent. So we need to build a natural language understanding system that can understand the meaning of a sentence. And these systems get better with more training. That's why we need many examples for every intent. And once we know the intent, then our response generator can select an appropriate response. Then you look at a dialogue system, and what these dialogue systems, there was a recent paper published where they were comparing the ability to be able to handle a flow or a dialogue. And it was looking at some of the big names. You can think of Siri, Cortana, and Alexa, and the challenge of them not being able to switch back and forth between flows. So if a user starts down a conversation with this automated assistant and then jumps around and asks another question, most of these systems can't do that. So we realized we really need to build out a system with the capability to allow users to change their mind. If we're missing information, we can ask what information we need in order to complete that task. So it's essentially what's called a slot filling based state machine. And it's taken us probably, I'd say, about at least 10 months of R&D to build out a dialogue system that does just that. It allows users to jump back and forth between questions as they're going through the process. And this is really a key element of our core IP. So I'll show you an example sample dialogue. I don't know if you can see that clearly, but I'll walk you through it. Essentially, the user is coming on to get a quick quote estimate. And the bot, the chatbot's asking, can I get your Canadian province? And the user may say something like, in this case, how long is this going to take? And at this point, the bot says, getting an estimate will take you, 1 to 2 minutes. And then more importantly, gets them back to where they left off. Getting back to your quote, can I get your Canadian province? Now I ask again, what if I operate in multiple provinces? It's able to provide an answer and then bring me back to where we left off to get me to all the way to the point where I can now get a full quote right inside this chatbot. And so, one of the things our clients find incredibly powerful about this technology is really the scalability of it. How much are we able to use, technology instead of throwing more people at it? And in our company, as with many tech companies or startup companies in general, technology is really not a cost center, it is the company. And I think as soon as you start to think of technology at the core of the company, it becomes, truly transformative. And as we get deeper into insurance, our clients are asking us, how can we use AI and bots in our back office functions, not only consumer facing ones. So think of internal bots, business to employee, helping employees with IT requests. I need a new password, I'm locked out. How do I integrate with Salesforce or HR requests? Where can I get business cards? Can I take Monday off next week? And that's, as we get deeper, we start to look at how we can build out more of this there. And next slide. So I kind of want to end with this, and then happy to answer your question. But one thing that really struck me was people knew they were chatting with an automated assistant, and at the end of the conversation, they were saying thank you to the bot. And that was so fascinating to me because have you ever seen anyone thank the weather app on their phone for showing them the weather, or thank you Microsoft Word for saving a document? But I think the fact that conversations are so much conversation and language is so much a part of who we are as human beings, that it really gives this conversational interface a chance to go beyond what's been done in the past with standard technology, and maybe more importantly, build a sense of trust between humans and that technology. And by humanizing technology, we have this opportunity to reimagine how we connect with machines. Technology can take care of the mundane tasks and leave us to pursue higher relationships. And that to me is a future that's exciting and looking forward to.
Well, that's fascinating. I'm sorry, am I stepping on?
No, that's yeah. I wanted to end with that.
That's fascinating. I have another question, but just when you thank the machine, does that do anything to the machine? Does it make it respond faster, or smile at you a little bit more, or how does that work?
Well, yeah, in this case, it's thanks for your help. Happy to help. Happy to we just respond in that way. But I mean, I guess you could program some sort of reward for it if it does a good job.
But just quickly, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing? You talked about some very significant opportunities, but in the year 2018, what are some of the challenges with the technology and especially on the insurance side of this?
Yeah, I think with most emerging technologies, the first applications are usually built almost in silos, right? They're not integrated with existing infrastructure, which often results in a suboptimal user experience. And I think in 2018, we're going to start to see much better integration with things like customer databases, your management systems, analytics. So bringing customer history and data into these interactions. And I think that's going to result in a more personalized and productive interactions, right? We're starting to see the importance of, and Andrew might talk to UI and UX design, right? We're going to see demand for writers, designers, psychologists, linguists, so I think this next generation of conversational agents will be much better at being more conversational in nature and handling more advanced dialogues.
Well, that's great. I appreciate it. So Ileana, I guess this is your time now. So I will leave you with that.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Patrick. It's a pleasure being here today. Blockchain is certainly a very topical theme for us to be discussing today, especially in the insurance space, given the amount of attention that it is garnering from top government leaders, top business leaders around the world. So what is blockchain? That's really going to be the first question that we'll answer during today's session. I'd like to spend a couple of moments to disambiguate the distinction between Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, and blockchain as the underlying set of technologies that enable new business models to arise. I'll cover a couple of the use cases that we're starting to see in a number of industries, and granted, insurance is not the primary place where this technology is being explored, at least not initially, but certainly many lessons learned from other areas that can be applied here. I will highlight some of the most interesting use cases that we're starting to see that are specific to insurance, and I'll leave the audience with some tidbits as to how best to approach this new emerging technology, given that it's a very complex topic and requires close stakeholder collaboration between multiple parties. So why don't we go to the next slide? Most people tend to associate the word blockchain with Bitcoin, which was the very first iteration of the technology that was introduced in 2008, 2009. Many know Bitcoin as being a peer-to-peer digital currency that is not controlled by any government or central bank. But the technology that enables Bitcoin to run is called the blockchain. And the blockchain is a distributed ledger that records transactions that have occurred in a network and can transfer value and information without the control of any centralized authority or intermediary. Imagine if everyone in this room was connected to a network and was transferring value from point A to point B. And if that transaction was not solely residing in the records of company A or party A and in the records of party B, but rather that information was then propagated across the network and all of the records were being updated in real time. What this means is that any transaction that occurs is immutable, and there's no opportunity for fraud and modification of that transaction, given that you have a number of stakeholders that are all seeing the information update in real time. This is a very back office technology. It's the blend of cryptography, mathematics, distributed systems. And in order to fully appreciate the complexities of the space, you may find yourself being tempted to go out and get advanced degrees in each of these particular domains. But not to worry, there are plenty of very smart technologists working on the back-end configurations. And what's most important for this audience is to think through, what does a distributed shared ledger that's shared between multiple parties mean for your particular business? We're seeing interest in blockchain technology from across all sectors. It started out primarily in the financial services world with banking, where the notion of a cryptocurrency was the most relevant as being impactful to the day-to-day roles that traditional financial institutions play. But that conversation has expanded to be far broader. There are use cases in the transaction clearing and settlement world. In Canada, Bank of Canada announced Project Jasper Phase 3, which is looking precisely at this with the Toronto Stock Exchange, Bank of Canada, and Payments Canada. Some of the use cases that we're seeing garner a lot of attention are in the supply chain world, with both pharmaceutical serialization, so ensuring that the medicine that you take, all the way from active pharmaceutical ingredient to ending up in your medicine cabinet, is in fact not counterfeit. We've also seen examples related to food traceability from seed to sale, or poultry from egg all the way through to a product that is on your grocery store shelves. So the use cases are quite broad, but in insurance specifically, we're starting to see movement as it relates to PNC claims settlement, catastrophe swaps and bonds, reinsurance, and flight insurance. Let me give you an example of how blockchain technology, this distributed ledger, plus the notion of a smart contract, can be applied in the world of insurance. I would suspect that most people on this line have at some point experienced a flight that was delayed or canceled. I imagine everyone is currently sitting around and nodding. Yes, I see Patrick waiting. Perfect. And what was the process to go and file the paperwork once you've returned from your trip to submit a claim for that cancellation? And who hasn't experienced the hassle of going to the agent at the airline and asking for what your rights are as a consumer? Not to mention all of the back office processing that's involved in facilitating that claims payment. In the world of blockchain, we are seeing use cases whereby we're automating this entire process and moving towards more of a world of peer-to-peer and flatter insurance structures. There's a project underway right now based out of Europe. And in that particular project, what they've done is they've automated the insurance process such that as an individual purchases their policy, in their policy, it would state that if your flight is delayed by 2 hours or longer, then you are able to receive your compensation. This system is pulling information from a number of different sources that are reporting on whether or not a flight left, what time it left, or whether it was canceled entirely, and is able to automatically pay the end consumer per their policy, removing the need for any manual processing or any manual payment transaction. And it's really this concept of the distributed ledger plus the smart contract logic that has the majority of companies that are currently looking at this space trying to figure out how they might be able to apply this within their own sub-business. So why don't we move to the next slide? One of the things to remember with blockchain technology, and we could go into many, many more levels of technical depth of how the technology actually works, is that this is a new domain. Bitcoin was only introduced in 2008, 2009. It's taken a couple of years for the enterprise community to start thinking through ways that this impacts enterprise use cases. Over the course of the past couple of years, we've seen a number of blockchain platforms arise that are specifically designed to meet the enterprise requirements of security, scalability, transaction throughput, as well as privacy. And for many clients that we work with, they come to us with questions of what is blockchain, and going through that early ideation of identifying various areas in their own businesses where this technology could be impactful, all the way through to prioritizing a handful of use cases that are likely to be most relevant for them and have a high impact with limited amount of effort, all the way through to figuring out how do you design a proof of concept or a prototype to be able to test out this technology, eventually with the goal of getting to production readiness. So that's usually the life cycle that we see from companies in a number of domains. And in the insurance space specifically, we've had the likes of Allianz and AXA make public announcements as to their experimentation and prototyping in this domain. One thing to consider though, and I find that this is often not talked about when we address the blockchain space, is that blockchain is only one technology. And it's one technology out of a full product suite that would be important to tie together to have a meaningful business impact. My goal is that in the next 5 years, we're not having an entire segment on a webinar dedicated to just the topic of blockchain, but rather it's more of a back-end technology that ends up being implemented in our businesses, and we as consumers and we as business folks are only interested in what this technology actually enables in concert with trends we're seeing in Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. But blockchain being really the transactional communication and recording layer that many of our systems are ultimately connected to. So I'll pause there. I assume that there are many questions. There are lots of resources where you can learn at a much deeper level how blockchain works and the impact for insurance. Given that we only have limited time, I wanted to just put this on your radar and encourage further exploration and research.
Well, thanks, Ileana, and I think you're right. If we have folks out there, if you'd like questions for Ileana, please just jot them down on the question box in the bar, hopefully on your screen. But Ileana, before we leave you, I think you were addressing this at the end. Blockchain technology, in my experience, can get really complex really quickly. How do you help customers, especially senior level executives, to understand the opportunities that are available, or do you go through the IT area and have them do the translation?
What's been really interesting is the recognition that to make meaningful progress, this can't be a pure IT conversation. This also can't be a purely business-initiated conversation. I've seen at both ends of the spectrum, both where the CEO taps somebody on the shoulder and says, we need a blockchain strategy because our chair of the board said so, or where we are approached by the technology team that says, this is really interesting and this could solve a lot of our problems. Can we go and implement it? Rather, this is going to require a fundamental shift in strategy with support from the technology organization, with an understanding that this is going to be impactful across the board and has a change management impact as well. So typically what we advise our clients to do is to spend some time understanding the basics of how it works. You don't need to go and have an advanced degree in any of these technical disciplines, but there are a number of blogs and books and TED Talks on the topic that are a really, really great starting point. And once you understand the mechanics, and I often start with cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin specifically, because this is where this whole conversation started, once you understand at a high level how that works and why it's important, it doesn't take long for the light bulbs to start going off as people start to apply this into their own day-to-day roles.
That's super. Thanks, Ileana. So we turn now to Cletus, who was formerly Clement, who's going to talk to the auto telematics. Cletus.
Thanks, Patrick. That's my other brother, Clement. But the so why is the largest global insurance telematics company care about mobility? So mobility options are going to make a significant difference in the insurance business. It's one of the leading reasons why at Octo we purchased the second largest mobility platform. But I want to make sure that when I refer to mobility, everybody understands I'm talking about non-traditional ways of getting around, like car sharing, ride hailing, and many others. I'll talk about those in a minute. But mobility options are inevitable. They are the most viable solution to meet an exploding population that's crowding our streets and our highways. They're going to change the automotive and insurance worlds, and the impact is pretty much inevitable. And so I'm presenting here some census data on the left-hand side of the screen, and some of the data points regarding that on the right-hand side. But I think we all feel the impact of this additional 1 billion amount of people we've added to the planet since 2000. And any one of us would be hard pressed to find someone who won't point out how bad traffic's become in the last 8 to 10 years. I was talking to a person a little while back, and they made this comment that they said, well, if I get on the road by 5:30 in the morning, it's not so bad. Of course, I rolled my eyes thinking, get out the door at 5:30 in the morning. It's horrible, right? But consider another billion people in less than 8 years. It's just going to get a lot worse. And so that's why mobility is going to be cranking. But I hear also a lot of people say, when I make that comment, well, I can't wait for the autonomously driven vehicle. And that's good. That's good. But the point here about 20 years of challenges is going to be pretty interesting for the insurance market. So if we look at some of the statistics that are out there right now, people projecting for 2020 will see level 4 vehicles, which are vehicles that have a steering wheel, but the steering wheel is optional. We're going to see acceptance in specific markets, probably around some trucking, some public transportation, and some mobility solutions. By 2030, we're expecting to see level 4 vehicles reach a reasonable purchase price and acceptance. Kia announced either 2 or 3 weeks ago that they intend to have level 4 available in all model lines by 2030. So then if we take the estimate of 12 to 15 years for the overall car park to evolve, and the older cars go away, we're looking at what, 2040, 2045. So that essentially means that we're going to have 25 years of challenges as vehicles that are sometimes driven by people and sometimes driven by computers are on the road. We'll have infrastructure challenges and all sorts of things. And frankly, anyone who's been following autonomous vehicle knows that the computers and the people don't mix particularly well. We process information a bit different, and which causes accidents and challenges as we go forward. But let's talk about the market trends a little bit on the next slide. What we're seeing right now is a paradigm shift from vehicle ownership to vehicle usage. That we're seeing a lot more in terms of hype than actual numbers, but the numbers are growing rapidly month over month. And we're seeing a lot more innovative vehicle mobility business models that are growing and evolving. In Canada, we've seen a lot more spring up. Other markets have been far more active. But the traditional methods of transportations that you see here on the left-hand side of this slide are going to shift to combine with that also some of the mobility solutions you see on the right. The increase in commercial, corporate, and peer-to-peer car sharing. And again, for benefit of those listening, I want to make sure people understand. Commercial car sharing is like Zipcar, companies like that. Corporate car sharing is growing as a benefit in universities and companies around the world, and Alphabet is really big on it. And then peer-to-peer is me sharing my car with others. And we know that's growing. We're growing pretty rapidly, and the younger generation is adapting to it, that particular mode very quickly. So an increase in social ride-sharing companies is also, we're seeing that, as well as carpooling, and of course everyone is very familiar with ride-hailing, the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world, and how much that is growing and how much that is changing the industry as we see it. So we're going to continue to see an emergence of a user-centric approach that people are referring to as vehicle mobility as a service. And that in itself is going to quickly redefine drivers and vehicles on the road, not to mention when we start looking at the autonomous. So what we're going to see going forward is a whole set of new and unpredictable unpredictable driving patterns and variations that are going to be associated to all sorts of contextual data, whether it's location, weather, and all sorts of other things. And as these mobilities change, it's going to significantly impact how we look at our rating and actuarial tables. So what does that mean for telematics? If we can go to the next slide, it's going to shift liability. I could spend a long time, and fortunately I have a much bigger block of time at the conference and the ability to talk to people more, but this topic alone, you could spend an hour and a half on. So I'm just going to throw a few of the concepts out there in terms of what we should be thinking about, because it is not as cut dry as people think it is. Everyone says, oh, when we get an autonomous vehicle, it'll be simple, the liability just shift over to corporations. Well, it's not going to be that simple. You're going to have liability with corporate car sharing in general, whether it's around insuring drivers or vehicles or the company themselves. The auto manufacturers and suppliers, they're going to be faced with insuring software, hardware, and of course the big one, hacking liabilities. That is probably going to be one of the most significant pain points with regards to liability as we go forward. And then we also have individuals, and I love the saying, people say, hey, horses didn't go away. Cars being driven by people probably will not go away. There'll still probably be some on the road, whether it becomes a collector thing. And then, so what happens to coverage when humans are driving, whether it's needed or desired, especially when we're in level 4, we're going to have that mix. How is that going to impact the overall equation? How's that going to impact your actuarial tables? Fault, that's another huge piece, right? Computer versus people. Will computers have the benefit of the doubt over humans? Well, we all have software. We've all seen our computers reboot on us and do all sorts of fun stuff. So let's be honest, that they're not necessarily going to be, should we say, free of guilt in terms of the actions. So what are the manufacturers going to be doing, right? Are they going to be forthcoming with admission to liability? It's not exactly they have a really good track record in that particular department right now. And so how is that going to change, and where is that going to go? And then, of course, how do drivers defend themselves? How do they say, hey, you know what? That wasn't me. I have evidence here to prove that wasn't me. And I think telematics is going to play a role in all of these particular areas. And don't forget the rising cost of fixing the car right now. With semi-autonomous and autonomous technologies for safety and convenience, they're greatly increasing the cost of repair and premiums. So that whole piece of reducing claims, fraud, and bringing those costs down is every year is going to play a more and more significant role. In fact, we were just doing an interview for Newsweek regarding that particular aspect of how do we communicate to consumers to protect themselves against these rising costs. So the number one thing for the insurance companies is gathering and analyzing this data. It's going to be so key to the future of insurance. And if you're not engaged with any type of connected car solution right now, whether it's on your personal insurance or on the fleet side, you're very likely to be at a disadvantage to capitalize on this future mobility. And like most things, it's not going to probably be a gradual thing. It's going to do one of these hockey sticks right up. And those who are going to be well versed in the data and understanding what's going on, they're going to be the ones who are going to be able to capitalize on that stuff. So if you're not carrying, or say if you're carrying, you're not collecting data through telematics right now, you're going to be greatly challenged as these changes gain traction. So that kind of leads me to the next point. So what's the focus for 2018? First of all, implement UBI, get the data and gain the benefits of segmentation. I know this has been a big sticky point. A lot of actuarial people push against it, say we're giving away premium. So what I say then is implement telematics crashing claims. This is now, it's production ready. We've been running it since 2008 in production. We've seen serious results with regards to reduction in frame, fraud, claims costs, other LAE items. And these greatly offset any UBI expenses. In fact, it balances it out. So that's something that's important, because I think that's something that you'll win a little bit more traction with, especially with actuarial and others. That we've seen one customer, for example, have a 12-point reduction in their combined ratio for those cars that were using telematics, and that came almost all of that savings was out of LAE. And what they were able to do is spend now more of their time focused on that 20% of problems versus spending all those resources on the 80%, which are pretty much straightforward, honest accounts of a particular accident. So consider this, right? The data you start collecting now may be your insurance policy for the future. And I think that needs to come into the discussion when you're talking about telematics. Because usually I hear UBI go on the table and everyone's ears turn off. Oh, it's giving away premium. Start talking about crashing claims. And then when you get people who are really thinking about the future of mobility, becomes a very different conversation. That leads me to my last point, which is partner with a mobility solutions company. Get the data, understand the patterns, analyze against current actuarial and rating tables, because this is going to be a very rich source of data, and it's going to help you see all sorts of new driving patterns and all sorts of new pieces of data that will probably change your actuarials tables and your actuarial's perspective on how they're going to assess risk and how they're going to price competitively for that going forward. So hopefully a lot of you will be at the show and we can talk a lot more about some of these. I was moving quickly through this just to get people oriented to some of the challenges that we need to face and talk about, and also wanted to make sure we stayed on time there, Patrick.
Well, I appreciate that, Cletus. Just a quick question. You referenced data at the end in the mobility space. What are the key elements that those are used for in that?
I'm sorry, which type of data? The overall the mobility data? Yeah.
How is that used? Just fairly quickly on this.
Sure. For example, in our platform OMove, we've been analyzing a lot of data, and you see a lot more different. You see different patterns of whether someone is engaged in a rideshare program, whether they're giving their car out or doing a peer-to-peer car sharing, and also if they are engaged in Uber or Lyft type of programs. All of these things, they could be doing delivery. There's all these different new things. A consumer out there who may just have a standard auto policy, never add anything to that in terms of these types of activities that they're engaging in to increase their risk, and you really don't know. It's hard to tell. But when we look at the data, we can see very specific things. Certain trips to airports, you see certain patterns. For example, delivery is going to look a lot more like a spider web, because people are going to be efficient in how they deliver things. They're going to go from point A to point B to point C, then they might loop back around. So you'll see a much more organized. Whereas if they are doing ride hailing, you're just going to see just spaghetti everywhere. There's not going to be a lot of consistency except for some key, should we say, transportation points and some other locations. So these are going to be quick and easy ways to be able to say, hey, wait a minute, we probably have somebody here who's not being properly quoted in terms of the risk and pricing that they're seeing.
Great, appreciate that. So Andrew, you're going to be the last of the presenters and focusing on the user experience and the customer experience.
Hey, thanks a lot, Patrick, and welcome everyone to the webinar. Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, UX and CX. You know, I've lived my whole career in it in either InsurTech or in the FinTech space. But what I want to talk to you about in terms of the trends is, first of all, I'm sure that in the blogosphere, lots of people post things about design trends. What is the next trend in the customer experience, user experience? And these are the trends that I think that are relevant to our industry in Canada right now. So in my opinion, these are the trends. But before I talk about the trends, I first want to talk about the ingredient technology that we all need, which is data. And I think all of the panelists have touched on data. And we have to recognize that data, first and foremost, is a resource. Actually, it's a valuable resource. We have to now start thinking about data as a resource. And what's great about this resource is that it's infinitely expandable, right? If you think about the average person, we are approaching in the very near future an individual with a smartphone generating over more than a gigabyte of data per person per day. And that's just going to keep growing, right? Telematics in vehicles, all generating data, right? The stuff Joseph's working on, generating data. So we're in an industry now where things we use, any technology we consume, generates data. And the data is a raw resource. And that data, that raw resource needs to be mined. And that kind of like a little bit of the Bitcoin analogy, but more seriously speaking is that in order to get the gold out of it, you need to mine the data. And the gold out of this mining is actually the insights. And one of the biggest concerns around artificial intelligence today is that whether we can actually use artificial intelligence and machine learning to generate valuable insights. And so that's been the biggest question amongst a lot of the startups and everyone using AI. And I would have to suggest that data is an ingredient technology for artificial intelligence. Okay, so if you look at all the advancements right now happening in artificial intelligence, it's absolutely accelerating. And artificial intelligence really started, tens of years ago. I remember back in my school, my final paper was on artificial intelligence, and I did a paper on natural language processing. But today, we have enough data to actually make this work. And we have enough processing power to actually make this work. And here, I'm showing you two pictures that I took myself at CES. One is Brian Krzanich, which is the CEO of Intel, and Jensen Huang, which is the CEO of NVIDIA, both holding chips dedicated for artificial intelligence processing, right? Those are chips in her hand, dedicated to getting the data, mining it, creating actionable insights, putting it into a neural pattern so that it continuously learns. So those guys are building the technology in order to accelerate the software. Because today, I think traditionally we see AI as a software piece, as a software we write software that generates neural nets and creates actionable data. But now they're building smaller and smaller, lower cost, lower power consuming chips that are doing this. So I want you guys to think of everything, data as a resource, as an ingredient technology. With data, we're going to get artificial intelligence. And keeping this in mind, this is how the user experience and the customer experience trends are going to lay out. First and foremost, we talked about it earlier amongst the panels, is smart personalization, okay? So no longer will our customers expect, they will expect a lot more than a one-size-fit-all experience. They will expect smart personalization, right? So here's an example of smart personalization we see today. It's very easy. So you go on Amazon, shop for shoes, right? And then when you go back to Google and search for something, or Facebook, you see those shoes in your feed. So that's fairly crude smart personalization that you can see today. But where is that going to expand to is towards a retail experience, right? And without having smart personalization, I think retailers are going to have a hard time attracting customers back. They must have smart personalization in their retail experience. And I'll give you some more examples of that. If I was walking into a Guess outlet and I look for a certain type of clothing, I wouldn't mind an email or some other showing discounts or offers on the things that I was shopping for and perhaps didn't buy. So we got to be smart about the experience. And with insurance, customers are going to start expecting that about us, our data, and you're going to be able to create a smart insurance product that meets needs. And this is true for P&C and for commercial insurance. Now, Joseph talked about the second point a lot. The next UX trending is humanization. And I think Joseph showed some great examples of connecting people with the technology. And that's definitely going to be expected in a purchase, sale, or service experience, right? I want to be able to use the tech to be faster, but I also want it to feel human or natural, the way I do things. And that's one way to inspire trust. And this is why Joseph is doing some interesting things on the chatbot front. It's because it is the same way as I would naturally want to chat with my friends, right? I'm going to switch topics and go back. And I may ask questions and I need the answers, and then go back to the original, kind of purchase flow, etc. And I'm going to say thank you, right? That's a natural thing. And And our technology needs to support the thank you, because I don't think we should be rude to technology either. I know, Patrick, you might think I'm a little bit out there on that front, but I think it's true that we are going to say, thank you to our technology. Well, another part of humanization is that not only does it inspire trust, and because it's going to be like naturally how I do things with other people as I would with the technology, but also I want to be able to transfer out of my technology and talk to a real person at some point. And this is kind of a bit of a project we're working on with Joseph at Kinetics, where we're going to chat, and we're going to also allow people to connect directly, to an insurance expert, to an agent, to have a human conversation. This conversation is going to let me research first through technology, then I'm going to be able to transfer into the human side. The next trend is a trend everyone's been talking about, especially at Christmas with the release of the Amazon Echo, is voice, right? For me, I've been using these smart speakers for quite some time. I got them ahead of their release in Canada by going to the electronics retailer in the US and picking them up. We've started developing on these, so I've got lots of these devices in my office all the time. And you know what? I don't even type for the weather anymore. The weather network app's pretty useless, because I'm asking my voice speaker, what's the weather? What's the weather today? What's the weather tomorrow? So I think that's going to be a trend, voice instead of QWERTY. I know you can get an insurance quote on Kinetics by asking Google or Alexa. For us, I know Aviva's got stuff, Manulife's developing. A rash of insurance companies in the US have voice activated assistants, and it's allowed facilitate the frequently asked questions. So I think that's a trend. We're going to use more and more voice, and in fact, this voice technology is making the IoT for the consumer side grow. It is stats have shown that because of the smart speaker, the purchase of smart lighting has grown 6.6 times. The purchase of smart thermostats has grown more than 2x its expectation as a result of these smart speakers being built. The next trend is the design for the age of immediacy. That's going to be key. And for the insurance industry, what that means is this. Both whether you're shopping for commercial insurance or as a small business, or you're shopping for a car and a home, we need to be able to research all that stuff online. And if we want to, we need to buy that online and have a policy active right away, right? This age of immediacy is because of Uber. I can summon a cab right away. It's because of Tinder. I can swipe left or right, right? Age of demand. Trove has on-demand insurance. I can insure my camera when I walk out the door. All those things. So we have to start designing for the age of immediacy. And in the Canadian insurance industry, I think those things like buy online is important. The last trend I want to talk about is something that I'm going to save for the Insurance Canada conference, and that is new immersive realities in VR. And so I've been playing with these things, VR controllers and my glasses here. I'm not going to put them on right now, but it does have, I think, a future application to insurance. But in the immediate, AR is going to be an important feature that we need to look at as an industry, right? So this is an example of AR that's being applied. The company Betterview has drones, flies drones over commercial properties, assess the properties for things like air conditioning damage, leaks, etc. Stuff that it's hard to see with the naked eye, superimpose the data that it's fine so that we can visually look at it. So that's an example of augmented reality in the insurance space. For me as a driver, I got my car has heads-up display, it's augmented reality. So I'm gonna be safer because I'm not looking at my speedometer down, I'm looking at my windshield to see my speed and my navigation instead of looking left or right. So that's another example of AR. I'm gonna show VR at my keynote at Insurance Canada, so stand by for that. So what are we doing with all of this? All of this is all about creating a frictionless user experience, okay? And we've heard about the frictionless omni-channel experience as you got to integrate email with mobile with the web. But in 2018, we got to start integrating email with mobile with the web with smart speakers, IoT, the connected home, with Octo telematics, with driverless vehicles, etc. So smart personalization is if I'm driving, if I'm a good driver, I don't want to pay for what bad drivers. I want to pay for what how I'm driving, which is going to be told by telematics, right? And I should get the discount if I have the Nest, because the data is available whether my Nest Home Protect is working, and it's going to save me from fire and smoke, etc. And lastly, creating a frictionless experience is not an easy thing. It is very tough. And here's an example of Amazon Go, the store that launched. If you can go to the next slide, to create no lineups, only to create a lineup to get in, right? And so, I mean, they've been testing this model for quite some time now and finally launched it to the general public. And as you can see, it's still, it could have some bugs, and they work throughout the year to test, and they're going to keep testing this. And what I'm saying here is, my final point is, you know, the omni-channel experience, the CX US is never going to be perfect, 100% optimal. And in order to create winning experiences that will delight your customer, you've got to keep testing, 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 and testing. That's it.
So, Andrew,
yeah.
let me just back up just a little bit on this. Now, you talked about personal data and this helping the user, but there's still a fair number of people that get a little spooked out by some of this stuff. And how much do you know about me and things like that? How do you provide a bit of a safe zone with folks like that? Is there anything like that you're working on?
Yeah, I think absolutely the way to do the safe zone piece is transparency. And I think some legislation, such as the Canadian anti-spam CASL legislation, is heading in the right direction in terms of providing transparency. So before you use the personal data or capture, I'd like to opt in. I'd like to know what you're going to use that data for. And that's the key way to build trust, is to be highly transparent. Now, when I've done panels and hosted and moderated panels with the younger demographic, millennials, et cetera, they've always said, you know, I'm happy to give my data to insurance companies if they can create a personalized products for me. I mean, Google knows it all with my smartphone already, so why wouldn't I just give it? You know, Fitbit has the data, et cetera. But I think the key to, you know, organizations like Google, Fitbit, Apple Watch, being able to capture this data is their transparency about how this data is going to be used, their commitment towards privacy and security. You know, Tim Cook, other CEOs constantly get online to talk about their commitment and to ensure you know, they earn the trust of the customers that they serve. So I think it's earning the trust, earning it through transparency, you know, earning it through direct opt-in of the service that you're looking to provide.
Super, thank you. So Doug, have we got anybody that's putting any questions forward? Yo, Doug.
Yeah, we're so clear that
yes, I guess not.
we learned everything. That's why.
I guess so. Let me go back to Joseph for a second. It's similar to one of the question I was asking Andrew. Some people get a little bit spooked out with AI coming in, and it isn't so much that they're looking into them, but what happens to me? Does this device take over what I've been doing, and how do you address those types of concerns?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot. You know, in the future, will machines replace humans? You know, and specifically when it comes our focus, which is insurance sales. You know, I still think that selling is all about building relationships. You and I buy from people that we like. You know, we don't buy from people we hate. Yes, there's going to be products where you just click and buy. But when it comes to important decisions, you know, especially in insurance or business, it's still about relationships. You want to know that the person understands your business, understands you, is looking to help you solve a problem. And I think that requires a level of human connection that no machine can ever do, or definitely at least not yet. So kind of to Andrew's point as well, where the machines can handle a lot of the mundane tasks, but when there's a need to transfer that over to a human agent, ensuring that the technology can do that. And I think that's good, that it's key.
Appreciate that. Ileana, I got a question for you, and it gets maybe a little bit geeky. In blockchain suppliers, it seems like there's a growing number of organizations that are bringing things forward. And I was at an event not too long ago, and they were throwing some pretty good mud at each other. Is this something that's going to even confuse the issue more, or is this going to rationalize itself?
Yes, so the question of which technology or set of technologies to use for a particular use case is fairly complex. We've been developing a number of frameworks and doing advanced research and development in our labs to be able to assess and compare multiple of these platforms, to be able to recommend to our clients based on their business and functional requirements what technologies are the best fit. For someone who is not intimately familiar with the technical specifications, it can be a little daunting to go to an event where you have representation from multiple technology platforms claiming to be the best general purpose technology stacks. The reality is that there is no such thing as a general purpose stack that's great for every single use case, and it does require much further research to be able to make an educated decision. But eventually, I do suspect that this market will start to consolidate, especially as we have more standards and interoperability frameworks that arise.
Appreciate that, Ileana. Last question, then, Cletus. You said in one of your documents that without telematics, user, if they didn't have access to that, might be disadvantaged. What do you think regulators would think about that type of exposure? Is that something that's a concern? And I think we need you to turn on your mic.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yep.
Good. Sorry about that. Well, so the agencies, they tend to be maybe even more conservative than the insurance companies, which are pretty conservative in the first place, right? And this impacts a lot of the decision process in general. So regulators do need to start thinking about this, but like the insurance companies, they tend to wait until things get to be critical mass or they're getting a lot of pressure, which is unfortunate. We have some insurance carriers who are trying to lead the commissions forward in thinking about some of these things, and that's good. But it seems to vary in the U.S. state by state, and obviously within Canada, the various different commissions all operate very differently and see the world very, very differently. So it's really up to us in the industry. It's up to us insurance carriers to be making the case for them that says, hey, look, there's real ROI here. We need to keep costs down. These are tactics that we have to focus on to be able to keep the cost down or keep it from increasing more exponentially. And at the heart of that is going to be gathering a lot of rich data through telematics to be able to understand the true nature of the risk and frankly, potentially even uncover what could be very, very dangerous situations before they would naturally come to light. And the best example is if we have faulty issues with autonomous or semi-autonomous capabilities or hacking or something like this, how long is that going to go and be dangerous until someone's going to say, hey, wait a minute, we now have enough data and enough people have died that, oh, we think there might be an issue here. And we need to start thinking about those, because if there's a serious enough hacking event, by the time, through our traditional methods of trying to understand what's going on with the crashes and the claims and all the data we have to sort through, is that going to be fast enough to save the amount of lives that we really need to be thinking about? So all of these play together. Insurance carriers need to be working on this stuff because they're the ones who are going to make the case to all the various commissions going forward.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for a really interesting experience. Joseph, Ileana, Cletus, Andrew, thank you very much. We will have a short video at the end, but as several of the people said today, this is actually a summary of some of the content that you will be seeing at the Insurance Canada Technology Conference being held in Toronto on the 27th and 28th of February. There's detail that will be coming with this, and you can find additional detail on the website. We would look forward to welcoming you, and I'm sure that the folks here would be also looking to welcome you. The video that we're going to be doing, if you are on the telephone alone, you won't be able to hear the sound, but with the material that we're going to be sending out, you'll have an opportunity of seeing that. I'd like to thank all of you again, our presenters, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for this. I hope it was worthwhile to you, and I'll turn it over to Doug at this point, I guess. Cheers.
All right, that was fun.
See ya.
All right.
See you guys at the conference, right?
Yeah, sounds good. Bye-bye.
Okay.